Hey everyone, this is me, the Undead Viking, and here I am with another episode of Tales from Behind the DM Screen. Today, as you probably judged by the title, I'm going to be talking about traps and puzzles, and why, man, I mean, I have a tough time with these, and I waffle a great deal as to whether or not they're even needed in a D&D campaign. And I'm going to kind of go over a lot of different things here, but I still remember, like, one of the very first times I ever played Dungeons & Dragons. And I remember I was a fighter, we were going through some dungeon or whatever, and we found a chest, and the person running the game, a friend of my brother's, my older brother's, he said, yeah, so it's locked. And like, so the thief character, they weren't rogues back then, they were thieves. The thief character was like, oh, I go and I'm going to try to pick the lock. And he was like, and this was back when these were the only classes that had skills. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of like way back when type of storylines here, but basically, if you wanted to unlock something, you either had to have the key, you had to smash it open with a brick or your sword or something, or you had to have a thief in your party that would be able to do it. Anyway, so the thief like rolled against their lock-picking skill. They succeeded, but in the process, they were stuck by the classic poison needle trap in their finger, and the dungeon master said, make a saving throw versus poison, and they rolled low, and they said, okay, you're dead. And I remember as like the 7-year-old me was like, what? like literally, like we've been playing the game for like 2 or 3 hours, and because of one die roll, they had died, and all of a sudden I was like very scared of the possibility of there being traps in the dungeon. You know, I mean, we hadn't had anything else but just all of a sudden, boom, they're dead. He handed him another character sheet, and the guy started taking out the 6-sided dice and started re-rolling. And he had played before, so he was just like, whatever. And he was just started making the next character that he was going to make. And I remember just being so stunned by that turn of events. But that was the first trap. That was the first ever trap that I had ever seen or dealt with in any way in D&D. Now, traps and saving throws, for that matter, have definitely evolved as the game has continued. I mean, there are and were tons of other traps and puzzle rooms in many of the D&D games and D&D modules that were published by TSR, and then of course later on from WotC and things like that. And as they went on, I mean, to be frank, they got less deadly. I mean, it used to be that, like, when you hit 0 hit points, you were dead. I mean, now, and then that's just a continuation of the fact that Dungeons & Dragons just isn't as deadly as it once was, right? I mean, it used to be like, oh, you reach 0 hit points, you're dead. And then it was like somebody came up with the idea, and I don't even remember where this was. I suppose I could Google it up. But the whole idea is that once you reach negative 10 hit points, you were dead. And then it was negative your constitution, you were dead. And all these other things. But basically, the adventurers just started having more chances at living. And once again, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I mean, the reason for that is twofold. One, it's just the evolution of the game, and people just don't enjoy having their characters die. I mean, I played an entire campaign recently with my bard, and he managed to live from the first session to the last session, and everybody else went through multiple characters, but my character managed to stay alive. And I remember towards the end, I was just like, it would be so lame if right now he ended up croaking with like only 3 or 4 sessions left to go, but he did manage to live. But I mean, that in a way, I think that was something good too, because I definitely felt like, oh my gosh, I gotta make sure I'm careful, and I'm actually scared of combats and things like that. But once again, going down a rabbit hole. My point is that if you fell into a pit with spikes and you took 2d6 damage and your fighter had 8 hit points, that could kill you. And that was because you would hit 0 hit points and you were dead. You were on those spikes, and it was all over. There are tons of... Back in the day, there was Grimtooth, if you know what that is. I'm sure you do. The Grimtooth trap books were all about just coming up with all these crazy mechanical traps that were just made to basically kill characters. The problem with traps is this. Even when... And I'm not a killer DM. I don't go into situations trying to kill the players, but I do believe in challenging them, and I do believe making them work for their rewards. I just I've gone over this before, but you have to be challenging. The problem with traps is that by themselves they're kind of cheap, right? You're walking down this hallway and all of a sudden the floor opens up and you fall, the aforementioned 10 feet onto the pit of spikes. Because my character wasn't like constantly saying I'm tapping I'm taking my 10-foot pole out and I'm checking each and every possible cobblestone to make sure that it isn't loose and doesn't have some sort of poison gas spraying out of it or anything like that. That's not adventuring. Once again, down a rabbit hole. They used to have in the movement rate back in the day in D&D was the fact that you would move 120 feet in a dungeon in a turn, which, if I remember right, it was either a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Just think about that for a second. 120 feet. That is moving, 40 yards, okay? And in even a minute, that's ridiculously kind of slow. Admittedly, you got a giant backpack full of loot and you have swords and armor and what have you. But I think it was actually like 5 or 10 minutes. It was actually more than a minute, which meant that you were just basically just crawling forward and just checking and each and every wall. And maybe that was the reason why you were in a dungeon and it was kind of spooky. But no, it was just a ridiculous rate of movement. Regardless, where I'm getting to is that traps just kind of slow the game down. And especially now in 5th edition D&D and 2nd edition Pathfinder and most other more modern versions of fantasy role-playing, a 10-foot trap take a little bit of damage. You throw a rope to the adventurer and she crawls out, and you move on with your life, right? Maybe a cleric has to cast a healing spell on you. Maybe a paladin comes over and does a lay on hands or something like that. But you just move forward. And traps basically just become a resource burning element of the game. Perhaps it's a trap where you need to levitate up to be able to hit a button or something like that, to be able to do something. Once again, you're forcing somebody to cast that spell and use up your resources. I mean, when you get right down to it, dungeons are all about resource allocation and being able to decide when and where to use said resources, whether they be hit points or spells or arrows or whatever, in order to be as successful as you possibly can until you have to hit kind of the reset button and start up again. Which, I mean, Wandering Monsters, that's the whole reason why there was Wandering Monsters, was because it was you weren't just going room to room like a Diablo situation of opening up a door and going into a spot and killing everything in that spot and going to another door and killing everything in that spot. The idea is that as you wandered about the dungeon, you would run into these creatures that were just, wandering on the dungeon themselves. And once again, these were put in there just to burn up resources and just to kind of keep the party on their toes as well. I should do a Wandering Monsters video and just why they're important and why we don't use them. I understand why we don't use them. But regardless, I'm trying to talk about traps. Traps are just boring. I mean, okay, first of all, the random trap. You happen to walk down this hallway and halfway down there's a tripwire and that makes a volley of arrows go speeding through the party and do a bunch of damage. The players aren't going to be saying, I'm going to check this 10-foot area for traps. I'm going to check that 10-foot area for traps. Those things. They're not going to be doing that. They're just going to be like, okay, head north. And if you are hitting them with traps so much that they are literally like crawling on hands and knees trying to figure out, okay, we're safe, keep moving forward. Who wants to do that? That isn't fun or heroic or anything as well. So, at most what it is, a trap is just something like the DM can just spit at the party and then just keep them on their toes. But they're not even going to really remember it or care about it, and they're just going to move forward. And it's kind of an uninspiring moment in the whole dungeon exploration process. Now, puzzles are an entirely different thing, and I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. But I want to talk about traps that, basically situations where everything in the world says this is trapped, right? The aforementioned chest that I talked about before. Oh, look, we found this big giant locked chest. Obviously, it has a trap on it. I mean, if somebody went to the trouble of putting all of their ill-gotten loot, in the chest, and it is heavy, and when the players move it about a little bit, they can hear the coins jingling on the inside. Whoever owns that chest, if they're smart enough to do so, they're going to want to have some sort of trap in there, whether it is just a crossbow bolt that shoots out the front, the poison needle, an alarm that goes off that tells people that, hey, I'm getting robbed, and so the monsters come rushing in to see what's going on. There's all kinds of possibilities. When you move the chest off of it or you take the weight off it, it raises up, click, and that's when the boulder falls down from above. I mean, there's all kinds of different variations of what you can do. But it's just an obvious situation. There's also it looks like the statue in the room, you could move its arms, and obviously there's something to that. Why did the arms move on the statue? There has to be a reason. But people are going to want to check for traps. And so what happens? Every single time, the person that is the thief or the rogue or whatever, and if you don't have one of them, somebody else will try to figure something out. They're going to just say, I check for traps, or I search for traps, or I try to figure out what's going on and how this trap works. And that's fine. But I would ask, and I kind of express this, and I ask my players this, and I think if you're running games, I think you should do this as well. Instead of just having them say something like, I check for traps, say to them, how? And the first time you ask that, you're probably going to get this look. Well, by rolling my 20-sided. And just say, no. What are you doing? What are you looking at? If it's that statue, I was like, what are you doing? Are you slowly moving the arms of the statue to see if there's any if it's clicking into place or anything? Are you searching the base of the statue? I mean, have them walk you through it. They can say, okay, I'm looking to see if they move easily, meaning that they're well oiled, so they're being used a lot. Does it look like there's scuff marks on the joints, and they want to move into certain areas if they don't? And have them describe it to you. And if they do a good job of describing it to you, either one, if you know what the trap does, let's say that statue. Let's say there's just a knight, and he's got a shield and a shield and a sword, and if you move the arms out, then and to open up like that, then maybe the chest plate of the statue opens up, and inside there's a key or something else that the party needs, right? But if you take those two and you move them together, and they click together, maybe lightning shoots out of it and just zaps everybody in the room. I mean, I've got to use this now. Probably, and I can't. Well, no, because my players watch this, so I can't. But so anyway, and like, because maybe that maybe by putting those two together, that like connects the electric charge that's within the magical electric that's within this knight, and because you connect them, then that's the burst, right? So then the players are gonna be like, okay, well, if the player said, well, I'm gonna search it, I'm gonna like see like which way do they turn, and then I would say, okay, well, it looks like both of the arms, they can both turn in or they can turn out, and then if they say something like, oh, okay, well, do I see, like they'd say, if somebody said, the player said, well, if I push them in together, do I think like the hand and the shield would come into contact? And I was like, yeah, they probably would. And then they'd say, and then maybe the player says, okay, then fine, I do that. Okay, boom, the lightning goes off, right? But if it's one of those things where they say to you, it's like, okay, well, do I see any like weird scuff marks or anything where I would see those two connect? Now, you can answer that in a couple of ways. Maybe the people inside the dungeon know that, like, you don't have those things connect because it'll kill you otherwise. And so you could say, no, it doesn't look like they don't see any scuff marks or anything like that. Or, even better, what you could say to the players is, yeah, you can actually see there's, like little scorch marks where you would see those two things connect. It looks really weird. And they go, okay, I don't want to do that. And then they'd say, okay, let's open it up all the way. And then maybe they'd say, I'm going to look at the chest plate or something. Do I see anything? Yeah, you can see like a little indentation. Here's the deal. You can either give them a bonus to their roll. If you're playing like 5e, you can say, yeah, go ahead and search for traps with advantage, and then give them the information. Or you can just say, you know what, you're smart, you figured it out. You think that if you open it up, the chest plate will open up, things like that. And that way the player is interacting with the world, and the trap actually kind of takes on a life of its own. I'm more in favor of that type of situation where traps can be like searched for, like again with like the chest, like, oh, okay, I want to like peer down, take my bullseye lantern and shine my lantern inside the keyhole and see if I can see anything in there, that kind of thing. And there's a poison needle trap in there. Well, you can just say, yeah, okay, roll advantage. Yeah, you catch the glint of light. You can see there's a little tiny needle in there. Okay, yeah, you know where it is. You know it's trapped, that kind of thing. Now, removing it might be an entirely different thing. So there's all kinds of different options and things like that you can do. But just let the players interact with the world, and instead of just saying, I search for traps. I think that, and sometimes players are just going to be like, I don't really want to do it that way. Okay, fine, just roll the die. But trust me, if you give them a reward for being descriptive in what they're doing, then they're going to want to do it. And they're going to want to be able to, because people want to feel good about themselves when they're playing a game, and they also want to feel like they're smart and they're getting one over on the DM and all kinds of things like that. And so if you give them situations like that where they can be, as for like a video I did a while back, which was, let people be cool. If you can give them the ability to be cool, they're going to want to play to be cool. All right, now puzzles. I got two thoughts on puzzles. One, they're cool, and once again, if the players can figure them out, they can feel cool when they figure them out. But here's the deal: with a true puzzle, it isn't the characters that are figuring out the puzzle. There's not really anything where the character, with traps, okay, I'm gonna you can, your perception scores and things like that, those are what you're going to use for checking those things, right? But with a puzzle, maybe you'd allow this, but I don't. You're not gonna have a situation where somebody's gonna say, it's like, can I figure the puzzle out? Let me check in my intelligence roll. You'd be like, no. It doesn't work like that. You don't just, make an intelligence check, and if you get a 20, you just figure out how to, move the pieces on the chessboard to unlock the treasure vault or whatever. You don't get to do that. But, so what it is, it's going to be the players like coming up with the clever answer, right? It's kind of the same thing with like if you have a sphinx or whatever giving a riddle. It's like, it's like, and it's the players that are going to figure out the answer to the riddle, not the characters themselves. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't bad. Again, players like to feel smart, and they like to feel like they're cool, and they like to feel like they're awesome. But here you have a player that like might be able to figure out like a riddle or whatever, but they're playing a barbarian that has an intelligence and a wisdom combined score of 9 or something. It doesn't make sense that they would be able to answer the riddle, but the player themselves would be able to. And there's a disconnect there that doesn't really make sense. So my problem with puzzles, and that's like anything where it's like, okay, it's like, I've run into so many different ones. Like we had a situation where we had a puzzle where we walked into a room and there was a mirror and we saw reflections of ourselves in the mirror, but they looked different slightly. Maybe we all had the evil goatee on or something from the Star Trek world. But regardless, it was one of those things where it took us a while to realize that the reflections weren't quite doing exactly what we were doing, and then we realized that in the reflection of the room there was an item that we wanted, and then we had to kind of like trick our reflections into going back and grabbing that thing and then walking through and throwing it into the mirror so it would come into our world, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a cool little puzzle, and we eventually figured it out, and that was fine. But the problem with puzzles is that took us like an hour to figure that out, right? And I could tell the dungeon master running that was losing his mind, like that we just couldn't figure it out. And that's one of the problems with puzzles is that when you create the puzzle, you think it's so obvious that like the answer is X, Y, and Z, but you can't ever plan for your players being able to figure out the cleverness of whatever that you've created at first sight. And so when I talk about resources and burning up resources, one of the resources you have in real life is the playing time of the actual game that you're playing. And I'm not young anymore. I can't go to my buddy Andy's basement on a Saturday, get there at 1 o'clock, and be there until 4 in the morning playing D&D. I mean, if we want, when I was playing 12-hour sessions, spending an hour on a puzzle, who cares, right? But when you're getting together for 4 or 5 or hours every couple of weeks, spending an hour on a puzzle just to be able to get like one little like magical item or something like that, in my opinion, that's not really time well spent. You should be trying to drive the plot forward and get things done. So I would suggest that if you like using puzzles and or puzzle rooms, or how do I move the 5 discs that are on the walls into the correct locations so that you can move on to the next spot in the maze. Either A, make them relatively simple, so the players can hammer it out. And if you're not good at making puzzles, I mean, just Google it. I mean, if you just Google D&D puzzle rooms, you will find tons of free resources out there that you'll be able to download or just steal outright. There's also if you go to Drive Through RPG, there are tons of cheap PDFs that you can purchase, the same exact thing, and you can find the stuff that you want. There's even like a few, oh man, I can't remember the name of the publishing company anymore. If you Google Shadow Man's Traps, there was a bunch of books that came out at one time that an author wrote. They created several different puzzle books that were for D&D, and they were really, really good. I picked one up at Gen Con like forever ago, and then I ended up picking up the rest of them like through, I don't know, I think it was Barnes and Noble or something. But anyway, my point is that if you can't come up with a good puzzle yourself, and you really want to have a puzzle room, just maybe leave it to the pros, because I do. I'll tell you. I mean, I had a puzzle that I was trying to do like many years ago. This was a campaign I had in college, where I wanted the players to figure out that there were like 3 ghosts in this. It was actually a Halloween session, but there was this haunted mansion in the town, and there were 3 ghosts in the haunted mansion. And I don't remember everything about this, but the biggest thing about the 3 ghosts is that one of those 3 brothers, and I think I probably stole this from Myst or something, or got the inspiration from this, but one of the 3 brothers murdered the other 2. And they had to figure out, basically, while dealing with undead and dealing with like these 3 spirits, these ghostly spirits, they had to figure out which of the 3 was the malevolent one, and piece together which brother killed the other 2, and then find the spot where all 3 of the bodies were buried, and basically remove the murderer's brother's bones from that gravesite, so that the other 2 the spirits could rest, and also I think it was like if they had to bless the bones, and then I forget what they had to do. Like they had to put like the murder weapon or whatever with the bones of the middle brother, who was the one who killed his 2 brothers, with the middle brother, and then he would. I think then that ghost was going to be banished, and he would go to his much deserved final reward, in hell or what have you. And I remember I came up with this like fantastic puzzle of all these different rooms and these visions and everything, and I thought this was going to be amazing, and it was one of the things where they just didn't get it. They either didn't go into a certain room where a certain very, very important piece of information was, or they interpreted it wrong, so I ended up like just kind of like trying to change the clues they had and just get them focused into the direction that I wanted them to go. I mean, they thought they could just destroy the ghosts, and of course, like the ghosts wouldn't be destroyed. You could like make them like run, or you could disperse their energy, but they would just come back. And and I remember like, and I finally just had to give them like the Deus Ex Machina of having like the mother of the 3 ghosts show up and just say something like, the middle child is the bad seed, or something like that. I just had to hand them the answer on a silver platter, and then of course then they and then they were just like, and then they put like the murder dagger with that, and they figured it out finally, and I was like, but the whole thing was, it was towards the end, it was like a chore for me. And I can only imagine it was even more of a chore for the players, because they just weren't getting it and they just weren't understanding it. And at that point, I realized, nope, not going to do this anymore. I'm either going to flat out steal puzzles and mysteries and puzzle room ideas from already published work, or I'm just not going to use them, and I'm just going to put rooms full of orcs that people can smash apart for XP and gold, because that's what I'm good at. So there you go. Anyway, so that's my opinion. So if you have any thoughts about traps or puzzles or whatever in D&D, I'd love to hear about them. This ended up being a kind of a long one. I apologize for the deep dives in a few different sections. I just had a lot to talk about with this. But if you want to tell me what like your favorite puzzle room or favorite trap that you ever encountered, that'd be awesome. If you ever like had a situation where maybe you got a total party kill with like a trap or something, I'd love to hear about that. Just any of those things. And as always, if you have an idea for one of these, you've been very good. My audience has been very good about giving me ideas. And with the ideas you give me, they're all great. But I have to feel like I can actually talk about them and actually have some insight into them. This was actually, I apologize, I forget that somebody actually asked me about this as well, my thoughts on traps and puzzle rooms. So that's why this came from somebody who's been watching these videos. But there you go. I'd love to if you could take the time. I would really appreciate you hitting the old like button and the subscribe button and the what have you. Leave any comments that you may or may not have. Leave a comment that you may not have. Okay, anyway, but I appreciate you very much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll have more of these. My goal is 2 of these a week, so this is 1 down. I'll try to get something else out on Friday. I've got a good idea for one. Anyway, take care. I'll talk to you soon, and be the best version of you can possibly be. Adios.